Hello, greetings. Thank you for joining me again. I'm Tim Mendees, and tonight I'll be reading you one of my personal favourite stories uh, from the Mannison Press anthology, Little Boy Lost. Tonight's story is called Monster in the House, and as always, I will read you the story. I will tell you a little bit about this here old book, and also I will be doing questions and I'll be answering them like when I'm done. Yeah. So if you have any questions, put them down underneath the video and I will answer them. I realize that there is people on a watch party. This doesn't come up in my feed, but when I switch over to doing questions, I will look at them feeds and I will try and answer them as best as I can live. If not, and you still have questions, or even if you're watching this in 3 days' time and you have questions, just put them in the comments and I'll answer them. Okay. If you like what you're hearing and you want to check out this really good anthology, it's multi-genre, so it's a bit different for me. There are links below the video for the standard edition and the Kindle, and one for the special illustrated edition, but more on that later. Okay, so without further ado, let's start with Monster in the House. Nights always started like this. First, the lights went down, and then the temperature plummeted, as though the lights took it away as it left. Kenny could see his breath come in ragged wisps amongst the all-pervading gloom. The only illumination came from a sickly moon high above and the putrid yellow glow of distant streetlights. His room took on a sinister aspect after dark. His toys and furniture, bright and cheerful during daylight hours, twisted and formed menacing shadows once the lights were out. Kenny hugged his pillow and trembled. He was currently hiding under his bed, wrapped in his sheets like a large caterpillar. He hated being alone in the house alone at night. It felt like he was always alone. His father had a vibrant social life, whatever that meant, and his mother and elder sister were often out at parties and functions together, leaving Kenny to fend for himself in the old house by the woods. It hadn't always been this way. He used to have a babysitter, but since he turned 12, he flatly refused to be treated like a child. At least, that was the official reason for his sitter's sacking. Though, he did hear his mother yelling something at her one day as she left the house, and he was pretty sure that he heard his dad's name mentioned amongst the obscenities. Thunk. There it was again. The noise that made his heart do a flip every time. It was something entering the house. From the shambling gait, he could tell that it was something inhuman. It was the first of the things that hunted him every time he was alone. Every time the lights went out, Kenny clamped his hand under his jaw to stop his teeth chattering. He knew that his fears were irrational. He knew that monsters weren't real. But he had seen them in the dark. He had watched them stalk from room to room. Whoever they were, ghouls or abominations, they were hungry. Why did his parents have to buy a haunted house? He was happy in their nice big house in Truro. Why in God's name did they have to move to this rundown dump in a dead-end town like Bettles Cove? His mother had been angry when they had to move. His father seemed sad. His sister had thrown the tantrum to end all tantrums. She was 3 years his senior and seemed to think that the world revolved around her and her horrible friends. Kenny hated them. They always picked on him. The chimes of the old grandfather clock struck 11. This meant only one thing: danger. The other horrors would be here soon. Scratching and sniffing. Hunting. He would have to move in a minute, have to hide. One of them would be coming for him soon. His legs were stiff from the cold and cramped conditions. He could hear the beasts howling and crashing around. The largest of them, the shambler, as he knew it, was coming up the stairs. He could hear the ponderous footsteps and ragged breathing. It smelt foul and growled menacingly. Quickly and silently, he broke for cover and scuttled towards the wardrobe. An errant foot collided with an elaborate Lego model of a spaceship. It showered into bricks and crashed noisily. One stray brick got stuck in the arch of his foot, and he had to hobble to safety. And not a second too soon, he climbed into the wardrobe and shut the door. The bedroom door swung open with a crash. The shambler bellowed in anger as it dragged the remaining sheets and the Kenny decoy made of pillows to the floor. His head was a mass of tangled, matted fur, and its eyes were burning orange. Kenny could smell its noisome breath as it grunted and barked. Where it could have come from was a mystery. Kenny had never seen anything remotely like it, not even in the horror comics his one friend Mark enjoyed. It was large and misshapen. Its legs bowed, and its stomach wobbled like a frightful jelly as it stomped back and forth. Holding his breath as he peered through the crack in the door, Kenny hoped that the vicious creatures wouldn't detect his scent or hear his pounding heart. He sunk deeper into his hiding place behind a row of second-hand clothes and inappropriate hand-me-downs from his sister. The shambler turned in his direction. Kenny closed his eyes and prayed. The shambler first appeared shortly after Kenny had started at his new school. Kenny hated school, especially that school. It had taken him most of his young life to adjust to his first school. It had been tough going, but eventually he'd managed to settle in and even make some friends. He was a very shy and introverted youth, helped in no part by his ginger hair and podgy gerbil cheeks. The other kids used to call him the milkman's son, as the rest of the family were tall, slender, and dark. They eventually grew tired of making his life a misery when the new misfits arrived in later years. Now, though, he was back to square one, and to add to his woes, his rapidly approaching puberty had made his face look like the surface of the moon. Spots were a constant headache. The absolute nadir of Kenny's week was the horror of PE lessons. His teacher was an ex-squaddy who took great delight in making the boys suffer. Kenny couldn't catch, couldn't throw, Kenny had 2 left feet, and couldn't hit anything if he was standing stationary in front of him saying, "Hit me." In short, Kenny was hopeless at physical sports. Esports, on the other hand, that was a different matter. After a particularly embarrassing game of cricket earlier that week, Kenny had seen the schedule and panicked. A stray ball had gone sideways off a classmate's bat and struck him squarely in the plums. As he doubled over in agony, his face a mess of tears, snot and saliva. All the other boys had laughed. However, the girls had been far worse. Now he was known throughout the school as Kenny No Balls, or the Eunuch, depending on how far up the evolutionary ladder the tormentors happened to be. To avoid further humiliation, Kenny had made a break for freedom. He waited until nobody was looking, then darted out the back gate. The one good thing about being the school runt was that when you weren't there, nobody noticed or cared. He hung around the fields surrounding the school for an hour, playing with sticks and hunting for caches of pornography under bushes. He then went to sneak back in for the final period. It was IT, his favourite. He nearly got away with it too. The grumpy alcoholic that taught woodwork happened to be standing outside the back gate having a crafty smoke when he came sneaking back. He was promptly frog marched to the headmaster's office and given a world-class rollicking. He ended up missing IT after all. That night, his parents had sat him down at the dinner table and continued to berate him. Kenny was grounded for a fortnight and had his video game time cut down to 1 hour a night. He could have cared less about going outside, but the video game restrictions stung. Not that anybody was ever around to enforce the punishment. That night, his family went out to a party at a neighbour's house without him. That's when the shambler first appeared. He came crashing into his room, bellowing like a crazy bull, and tried to grab him. He had narrowly escaped. He managed to give the thing the slip and hid in his sister's room. Tonight, it didn't look like he would be so lucky. The beast was outside the doors now, sniffling and drooling. Kenny didn't want it to end like this. He'd managed to survive for so long. He'd tried to get help, tried to tell his family about the things that stalked the house at night, but his parents sent him to a psychologist who said it was all in his head. Monsters weren't real. They were just manifestations of his guilt. Like skipping class was a crime worthy of being eaten alive by some terrifying monstrosity. He was wrong. The monster before him was very real indeed. Reaching out its long, hairy arms and grabbing a door handle in both gnarled, razor-clawed paws, the shambler prepared to strike. This was it. It was now or never. Kenny had never fought back before. His whole life, no matter what the bullies or their hideous girlfriends did or said to him, he never once so much as raised a finger in his own defense. If he was to survive the night, he would have to raise more than just one finger. Groping in the dark, Kenny wrapped his hand around the handle of the nearest heavy object. Ironically, it was that cricket bat. The same cricket bat linked to so much recent trauma. He had stuffed it in the back of the wardrobe in ignominy. Out of sight. Out of mind. Thank God. Roaring and snorting, the shambler ripped the twin doors open. It paused for a second before ripping the clothes apart and spotting its prey. Kenny jabbed the bat as hard as he could into the creature's snout. Vile-smelling blood poured from the shambler's face. It staggered backwards, howling in pain and fury. He knew it would only be a matter of seconds before the creature recovered. Summoning all his courage, he leapt from the wardrobe and swung with all his might. I don't understand that. Sorry, the Facebook comment things just had a bit of a meltdown. Anyway. Yeah. Summoning all his courage, he leapt from the wardrobe and swung with all his might. The bat connected with the monster's temple, and it collapsed to the floor with a dull thud. Kenny was hyperventilating. He couldn't believe that he had survived. He located his asthma inhaler and took a couple of puffs, then sat on the edge of the bed. He could still hear the shrill commotion of the other monsters abroad that night. But for the moment, he had a short reprieve. Then the shambler started to moan. Kenny panicked, leapt up, cricket bat raised over his head. He brought it crashing down again and again. Faces flashed through his mind with every sickening crunch. PE teacher, woodwork teacher, sister's idiot boyfriend, the guys on the cricket team. Who's got no balls now, you bunch of bastards? Once the creature was slain, Kenny stared in shock at the masses of stinking blood in his room. It had splashed everywhere. It was up the walls, on the bed. It even ruined his favourite Batman poster. Good. This was all the proof he needed to prove to his family and that smug shrink that he wasn't crazy. Prove once and for all that monsters were real. Now all he had to do was get out of the house alive and find them. The corridor outside his room was empty. He could still hear crashing, snarling, and thrashing about downstairs. For the moment, however, he had to focus on getting down the corridor without alerting anything that might be lurking to his presence. The creatures that came from God knows where were many and varied. Some were quick and agile, some were slow and deliberate, but each one was deadly. His parents got the house on the cheap. He could never understand what could have possessed them to move into a place that had once been the home of a reputed witch. As far as he knew, his parents had money. At least they never let on otherwise. Damn. The floorboard beneath his left foot made a noise loud enough to wake the dead. It was followed by an even more disquieting noise. It was the surprised hiss of the serpent girl. This abomination was the second to manifest. The next time the shambler struck, he ran out of his room and almost collided with the vile creature. Tall, lithe, hooded like a cobra. The serpent girl could charge on her two vestigial legs just as quickly as she could crawl on her belly. She hissed in such a high pitch that it made his vision blur and his ears feel like they were about to erupt into geysers of blood. She was by far the quickest of the horrors. If she was roaming around, she would prove a formidable obstacle. Kenny had found a number of books belonging to the strange old hag that owned the house previously one day while exploring the cellar. He had pulled a large piece of crumbling plasterboard away from the damp wall and discovered a strange geometric design. In the corner, and below it, in a small aperture, was a box containing terrifying things. Most of the documents were written in strange dialects and scripts that he could neither fathom nor place. There was a collection of sketches of strange designs similar to the one on the cellar wall. There was one thing, however, that he could understand. It was the journal of the old witch. She had scrawled page after hideous page of notes and translations of the mouldering books. The witch rambled of opening the way to certain entities from outside through the use of strange angles and even stranger rites. She planned on calling upon several creatures to aid her ascent to cosmic godhood. She also included a handy bestiary. Next to a crude sketch of the creature that Kenny knew as the Serpent Girl, the witch had scrawled the legend, Child of Yig, or Lamia. There was also a sketch of the Shambler, though the script was barely legible. It called the horror some kind of hound from somewhere that sounded like the name of an exotic dish. Kenny thought that Shambler fit the job far better. On his tiptoes, Kenny backed towards the end of the corridor. The Lamia was on the move. He could hear the foul slithering and hissing of the beast. as she came crashing out of the room next door to his. He jumped into the storage room and peered around the door. Panic squeezed his lungs as he realized that in his flight he had dropped the cricket bat on the landing. The Lamia's keen eyes spotted the bat instantly. She hissed in anger and picked it up, testing the weight of the weapon against her palm. She looked up and down the corridor. Kenny shivered involuntarily as her cold gaze met his. The movement caused a roll of wrapping paper to fall to the floor. The Lamia grinned, baring her hideous fangs, and raised the cricket bat above her head. Kenny had to think fast. His eyes fell on the vacuum cleaner. He quickly grabbed the pipe and laid it by the door, then gathered the cable in his hand. The Lamia slithered to the door and burst through. Kenny kicked the pipe, and it tangled between her spindly little legs, causing her to fall forward into a stack of boxes. The Lamia let out a harsh shriek that made him feel woozy. If he didn't stop the foul noise quickly, he would be rendered insensible by the noise. With the electrical cord held tightly in both hands, Kenny mounted the Lamia's back, looped the cord around its neck, and leaned back with all his weight. It took far longer than he expected to snuff the creature's life out. It always looked so quick and easy in the films. After the foul Lamia had been dispatched, he crept out of the room and pulled the door closed behind him. All looked clear. The noise downstairs continued unabated. The thing he came to know as the abomination continued its destructive rampage. Furniture cracked and glasses smashed. But the worst thing by far was the inhuman bellowing. Resuming his stealthy path down the corridor, Kenny was surprised to hear water running in the bathroom. He pushed the door ajar and looked inside. There was a hideous sight in the bath. Of all the horrors that a crazy old witch could have conjured up, why would she have conjured up something as utterly revolting as a ghoul? The canine-featured subterranean corpse-eater made Kenny's flesh crawl. It loped around the house, sniffing and howling. Its scabrous and grotesquely hunched body was covered in matted tufts of wiry fur, and was the foulest smelling thing that Kenny had ever smelled. The creature only appeared on certain occasions. Kenny cursed his luck that the ghoul would have to be here on the night of his great escape. It was splashing around in the bath, obviously trying to rid itself of the revolting grave perfume. It would be far more stealthy hunter if its smell didn't give it away so readily. He couldn't fight the ghoul. That would be suicide. It was far too fast and powerful for that, but luckily a solution was at hand. The house had a major damp problem. The whole place was riddled with mold. One of the contributing factors was the fact that there was no ventilation in the bathroom. In an attempt to rectify this problem, his father had purchased a floor-standing dehumidifier. It was currently plugged in, sucking away at the air next to the bath. Creeping on his belly, like the dreaded Lamia that he'd just defeated, Kenny entered the bathroom. He had to keep very quiet and low as he headed for the dehumidifier. The ghoul dipped its head under the water. This was it, his moment to strike. With one fluid movement, he grabbed the unit with both hands and flung it into the bath. Electrical current crackled and sizzled. The ghoul screamed and thrashed as it was violently executed. The electrics popped, fuses blown, plunging the room into darkness. Then all was still once more. The witch's notes had said that ghouls were notoriously difficult to kill. She had talked of silver bullets and complete dismemberment, but nothing about direct current. Kenny had half a mind to correct the entry. Now, that would give credence to his parents' ridiculous claim that he had faked the notebook. He presented it to them in an attempt to convince them about the nocturnal visitors in the house. They had scoffed at the notebook and its rough sketches. They said that he must have wrote it himself. How ridiculous. It didn't even look remotely like his own handwriting. It was around that time that the abomination started to manifest. It was an amorphous mass that bubbled forth from the dark corners of the kitchen. It rampaged through the house, destroying everything in its path. The book called it a shaggy goth or something like that. Kenny thought that that was just one of those chaps that hung around down the local music venues. Nope, abomination it would remain. As he quickly descended the stairs, he racked his brain for anything in the notes that would help him defeat the creature. It mentioned things such as Mnar stones and Voorish signs, but he hadn't the faintest idea what they were. He would have to hope that he could sneak out of the house without being spotted. The abomination was in the kitchen as usual. It had a very distinctive smell, kind of like a pungent mixture of juniper berries and vomit. This was a problem. To exit the house via the front or back doors, he would have to pass the kitchen. What was worse, the staircase ended directly opposite the kitchen door. As Kenny reached the bottom step, the abomination threw a picture of his parents on their wedding day out of the door. It narrowly missed his head by a hair. The cheap plastic frame snapped and the glass fragmented into shards. Kenny let out a frightened yell. Ah! The abomination heard him. The unspeakable creature let out an eardrum-splitting roar and charged across the room. Charged might not be the best word to describe how the creature moved. It flowed and surged. It crashed into the door frame, making the partition wall shake, sending more pictures to the floor. The corridor leading to the front door was now carpeted in fragments of glass. This was another huge problem. Kenny was barefoot. With his heart pounding like crazy, Kenny made a desperate break for it, but it was too late. The abomination shot out a thick tentacle that blocked his escape. Quick as a flash, he darted into the kitchen and managed to avoid being snatched by another tentacle that appeared from the creature's formless bulk. Hundreds of appendages, mouths, and sensory apparatus formed at random, then disappeared on the large beast. Kenny darted around the kitchen island, throwing anything he could lay his hands on in an attempt to slow down its terrible advance. The cookbooks, cups, teabag jars, and wooden spoons did little to slow it down. It managed to absorb all that came its way with the minimum of ill effects. He was close to the back door now, and if he could just get out into the night, perhaps he could outrun the jelly-like thing. Thinking quickly, he kicked one of the kitchen stools over in the abomination's path. While it was distracted, he made a dash for the door. As his hand closed around the handle, a large tentacle coiled around his waist and dragged him back sharply. The small of his back slammed into the kitchen counter, sending sharp pain shooting down both legs. He tried to struggle free, but it was no use. The creature had him gripped tightly. The abomination formed itself into a grotesque parody of the human shape, with one huge orange eye in the center of its blobby head. Kenny screamed at it to let him go. He kicked and thrashed and flailed against the creature's massive frame, but it was no good. The more he struggled, the tighter the tentacles grasped. If they got any tighter, he was sure that his ribs would crack. An enormous black maw opened below the baleful eye. It opened wide and screeched in his face. Kenny could feel its damp, fetid breath against his skin. In an act of complete panic, he slammed his arms around on the worktop behind him, desperately trying to find something he could fend it off with before it bit his head off. Kenny was convinced that's what the creature wanted to do. Finally, his hand landed on the handle of a kitchen utensil. With luck, it was a knife. With all his might, Kenny drove the knife into the unblinking eye. A stream of foul ichor poured from the abomination's head, soaking his pajamas. It shrieked and let him go. Kenny ducked under as it pitched forward. Without looking back, he opened the door and stumbled out into the night. The cold air slapped him across the face. His vision cleared as he came slowly out of his panicked state. The grass was damp beneath his feet as he made his way across the lawn. Thankfully, he had remembered to put his inhaler in his pajama pocket. He took a couple of blasts and looked up at the glowering moon. He'd done it. He'd escaped. Not only had he escaped, but he actually managed to slay the creatures that had tormented him for so long. No more would he be known as Kenny No Balls. Now he was Kenny the Monster Slayer. I killed the monsters! He bellowed into the night sky, his arms raised in triumph in the center of the garden. Riding high on a burst of pure adrenaline, Kenny jogged out of the back gate and 2 doors along to Mr. and Mrs. Miller's place. This is where his parents would be. He would revel in the fact that he had beaten the monsters and could finally prove that he was neither a liar nor insane. He couldn't wait to see the look on his sister's stupid face. Funny, he'd expected the lights to be on at least. He mouthed the silent prayer that the darkness hadn't spread to other houses. He didn't think he could survive another tangle with an abomination. Cautiously, the back door opened. Kenny? What the devil are you doing here at this hour? The stern yet kindly voice of Mr. Miller asked. You should be at home in bed. He rubbed his bleary eyes and fished his glasses out of the breast pocket of his nightshirt. He placed them on his face and blinked in surprise. Kenny was covered from head to toe in sticky substance that looked a hell of a lot like blood. My God, boy, are you hurt? No, Kenny grinned from ear to ear. This isn't my blood. What then? Whose blood is it? The neighbor asked. It's from the monsters that haunt the dark. Before Mr. Miller could get out his bewildered next words, Mrs. Miller called from inside. Is everything all right, love? She inquired. Mr. Miller stammered. Then, hello, Mrs. Miller, Kenny said in a chipper manner. Could you tell my parents that I killed the monsters? What? Mrs. Miller came to the door wearing a puzzled expression that turned to one of horror upon seeing Kenny's soiled apparel. She instantly put an arm around the boy and whispered to her husband to go and check out the house. Mr. Miller nodded, slipped on a pair of shoes, and picked up his mobile phone. Mrs. Miller guided Kenny through to the lounge and sat him down on the sofa. The boy looked terribly confused. Where are my parents? He asked. They said they were coming here. Mrs. Miller explained that they had been here earlier, but something had happened to make them leave early. Kenny hated it when adults used words like something to cover up the fact that his mother and father had had yet another row. It was probably about the house. It was often about the house or the babysitter. But I wanted to show them that I'd killed the monsters, Kenny said sullenly. Mr. Miller came in quietly by the back door, vomited into the sink. Mrs. Miller leapt up to find out what the devil was the matter with her husband. One look at his ashen face was enough to tell her that something was very, very wrong indeed. The sounds of police sirens getting ever closer put the exclamation point on the unease. Detective Inspector Baker and Detective Sergeant Finch took young Kenny down to the police station. They gave him some nice clean paper pajamas and bagged up his dirty ones with a neat little tag for the laundrette. He was so happy about killing the monsters that he told everybody that he met, even those who really, really didn't want to hear about it, such as the shocked-looking nurse who gave him a once-over. The Millers explained that Kenny's family had been over earlier and it was for crisis talks. The crisis talks hadn't gone well. Kenny's mother proceeded to get blind drunk, which was a common occurrence, and tell his father to leave. His father, also fond of the old sauce, said that he would take Kenny and live with Kenny's babysitter. She was welcome to his ungrateful brat of a daughter, but you couldn't have Kenny. He was going to go and collect Kenny and leave right then, that minute. Meanwhile, Kenny's sister and her idiot boyfriend were going to stay with their mother. Mr. Miller never told his wife what he saw when he poked his head into the kitchen of number 23. He never had a peaceful night's sleep from that day forward. Kenny was taken away to live in a big hospital up north. It was surrounded by really high walls, and there were thick bars on the windows. Some of the people there were a bit odd, but at least he could play video games and board games all day. The monsters never bothered Kenny ever again. The end. Thank you. That was Monster in the House. Sorry, I got distracted at the beginning. It's like this bit's gone a bit mad. But anyway, like I say, if you have questions, get them down in there now. I'm just going to tell you all about the anthology and basically the process of how that story came about. First of all, this is the second in a series, Little Boy Lost. The first in the series was Little Girl Lost. And that had like people like Piers Anthony, and there was some really good names in it. But I'm really pleased. I'm, kind of humbled. I managed to get into this one, Little Boy Lost, More Tales of Youth Disrupted. It's not, as most of the things I'm in, is not a specific horror anthology. It's a multi-genre anthology. And like I said, it's got people like Piers Anthony, Jeremy Thackeray, Marie Vibbert, Ken Goldman, who some of you horror fans will know. And a whole bunch more. I would love to know because there's everything in this anthology from fantasy and sci-fi. There's even romance in here, right? I would love to know what some of the people who picked it up for, say, Piers Anthony's story expect, because he's obviously more well known for sci-fi and fantasy. So it'd be really interesting to know what some of these people who picked it up for something else think of my stuff, But anyway, as I said earlier, there's two different versions of this. There's this one, which is the standard paperback, and then there's this one, which is illustrated paperback. Now, the illustrations have been done by one of the editors for Mannison Press, Deirdre Owen, and they're great. They're really nice. I mean, it's really quite cool to see what somebody makes of your story, because I had no input on what she was going to come up with. When she sent it me, I was like, yeah, that's great. It just sums up the whole feel of it. There you go. I don't know if you can see that very well. There you go. There's the old monster coming around the door. There's old Kenny hiding under the bed. Yeah, nice moody thing. Anyway, and yeah, and every story has got a piece that really complements it really nicely. I mean, there's some really quite impressive compositions in it. I mean, I like that one as well. It's like a spaceship door kind of thing. Anyway, yeah, if you want to pick up either of those, the standard one is getbook.at /littleboylost, all one word, all lowercase. If you want the illustrated edition, that is getbook.at /littleboylostpic, PIC. It's basically the same as the first one, but and as I said earlier, it should be written down there below it. And while I'm on the subject of Mannison Press, I would like to thank Ron and Deirdre for for putting me in this, but I had some great news the other week. They've picked up my novella Burning Reflection to release as a Mannison mini book, and I'm absolutely over the moon about that. I mean, this will be my second novella that's been accepted. It's yeah, I'm so happy that it happened, and yeah, thank you. That story, funnily enough, started out as something completely different. It started out as a really short story for a monthly contest about mirrors. That was the subject, but it kind of went completely. I mean, that's my writing style. I kind of write in a stream of consciousness. I'll have an idea and I'll just see where it goes and then trim it if it needed. I don't really plan things, and it was supposed to be 4,000 words, and it ended up like a novella. Right. So let's see what we've got here. Oh, okay. Mike, yep. How you doing, Mike? You love the wicked twist. Yeah, I hoped it'd come off like that. I hope it wasn't too blatantly obvious. But yeah, this story comes out of a desire of mine. I mean, because I've written more psychological pieces before, but I haven't done as many as sort of more of the sort of cosmic or straight romps that I do. Yeah, I mean, I think this is closer in feel to A Matter of Recycling from A Course in the Forest. I wanted to do. I mean, I've always had a deep love of like things like Silent Hill and that kind of thing, and films like Seven, and all that kind of really dark psychological stuff. And yeah, I'm glad I managed to do it. It was one of those I didn't actually spot the submission until like the last minute. I was going on one of these submission sites, of which there are many, and I was like, oh! Yeah, quickly write one. Yeah, okay, Mr. Hewitt. Yeah, yeah, influence and power, sir. Influence. And power. Now, Chris comments. Yeah, I didn't know that if the camera had picked that up. Chris says, "Nice one. Well done on arranging the very real police sirens in the background at just the right time." I hate to think how you arranged that. It wasn't me, it was my agent. The orange crab called Gerald. Remember? It's him, with me. Yeah, I wondered if the camera had picked that up, because it happened before when thunder went at about the right time, but the camera didn't pick it up. Yeah. Okay, so what I'm just going to do now is Books. I've read everything on. Oh no, I haven't. There's stuff hiding down there. Oh, cool. Yeah, Deirdre says, thanks, Tim. I had so much fun illustrating your piece. Certainly gave me a lot to work with. Yeah. Well, I hope that. It's just really strange. It's like you never know what to expect to let somebody else interpret what, because I mean, you're a writer yourself. You know in your head, you know exactly how the story looks in your head, but it might look completely different in somebody else's. And it's really interesting to see that you actually did it pretty much exactly the same as I see it in mine. So yeah, no, I really like that. I really like that picture. Uh, John Rosenman. Oh, excellent. Thank you. I've really enjoyed my reading. Thanks. I believe there is watch party. I'm just gonna, if anybody else has any more questions, just get them down there. I'm just gonna quickly use this little tab thing here and have a look if there's been any comments on any of the watch parties. Like I said, if there hasn't, or you can't think of a question now, or you think of a question in the morning, just put it down and I'll answer it. You know, it doesn't look. I can't actually. Yeah. Anyway, I'm not. I'm not going to scour the internet at the moment. Okay. Right. John Rosenman says, finally got to this post. Tim, I think your story is great and it taps into many childhood fears. I had my monsters too. You read and act it out well. Thank you. And yeah, again, I mean, I think most children have monsters of some degree, don't they? Whether it's, you know, the one in the closet, the one under the bed, or the one in the locker room after PE. All children have their monsters. And that's something I want to tap into. So I'm glad you've noticed that. And thank you. Jason Owen says, poor Millers won't ever be the same. Nope. Yeah. Yeah. I didn't think about that. Poor neighbours. Yeah. Excellent. Well, I'm just going to start wrapping up now because it is incredibly hot today. I don't know if you noticed all the way through, but I'm absolutely melting. Plus the hay fever, the pollen is giving me a bit of a kicking as well. But once again, you can pick up the standard edition of Little Boy Lost, More Tales of Youth Disrupted from Mannison Press by going on the universal link getbook.at /littleboylost. And if you want the all singing, all dancing, shiny and sexy illustrated edition, it's pretty much exactly the same, but with pic on the end, PIC. So getbook.at /littleboylostpic. Again, those links should be underneath the video, like in the sort of the information, the video information. They're there. Just click on them, and it'll take you to your nearest Amazon. So no matter where you are, you could be on the moon. As long as the moon's got an Amazon, you'll be able to get a copy. Okay, thank you. I'll just have one last check. Oh, right, okay. Mark asks, well done, Tim. You don't seem nervous, were you? A little bit. This is the 9th one of these I've done. The first one I did, oh my god. Seriously. I mean, it's more nerve-wracking for me. Like, I find it more nerve-wracking. I mean, I've been on stage with bands and things like that, and I'm a DJ and things like that. And going in front of a crowd doesn't bother me. It really doesn't bother me because I can see them. I can gauge what their reactions are. Whereas I sit here in front of a computer screen, I'm reading to all you people out there, but I can't see you. You could be sitting there going, this sucks for all I know. You know what I mean? You can gauge, like with bands, like when you play music, if you play a slower one and the crowd all starts walking off towards the bar, you know how to play a faster one. You can't do any of that when it's all on the internet. It's nerve-wracking in its own way. But tonight, I mean, yeah, not so much nerves, but more Yeah. To be absolutely honest, I would have been less nervous if the obviously you guys can't see what I see now. I can see myself here, and down the thing is a feed, but it crashed as soon as I started it, and it and it was doing something really weird that was really distracting. It was like some red bar kept like like the progress bars you get on video games that are loading. It was like that, but it didn't really go anywhere. It just kept flashing. In the end, I just jabbed it with the mouse and it went away. So it's obviously a new Facebook feature that I don't know what it is. Oh, thanks, Deirdre. She says, very excited about Burning Reflection. It's going to make a great Mannison mini book. Yeah, well, so excited about that. And again, like with the design for Monster in the House, I'm really looking forward to see what they come up with for the cover, because while I've got another novella coming out, that's not out yet, and so and everything else I've been involved in has a cover, like some other cover. It's anthologies and magazines and things like that. So like the covers aren't based on my story. So I'm really looking forward to that. It's one of those really cool moments, I think, when you go, oh, that's that bit and that bit. So I'm really looking forward to that. You can see I'm like a kid in a sweet shop. I'm really excited about this. Okay. Right, that looks like it. And it's coming up to 50 minutes now. So thank you for tuning in. I will probably be doing another one at some point. Like I say, pick up the books. You won't regret it. I mean, if for anything, pick it up for Piers Anthony. It's an exclusive new story by sci-fi and fantasy legend Piers Anthony. Plus I'm in it. Thank you. The links are down below. You'll be hearing from me soon. Thanks for tuning in. Have a good evening.